Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session of Islam Study Circle. The Quranic verse that we are going to discuss today relates to verse 153 of Surah Baqarah. It says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu sta'inu bis-sabri was-salah, inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Believers, seek help from steadfastness and from the prayer. Indeed, God is with those who are steadfast. So this is a Quranic verse which is of paramount importance. It gives us a lot of guidance, in fact everyday guidance, and that is that we as we traverse the terrain of life, the rugged terrain of life, often we encounter problems, often we encounter issues which make us depressed, and we feel as if we have been ignored maybe, or if the fact is that the Almighty is not taking good care of us. Although of course this is according to plan, and the plan, on the grand plan which has been mentioned in the Quran, is that the Almighty tests us and He tests our mettle, but at the same time, even though He tests our mettle, He has given us certain ways and means through which we can encounter and traverse this path of life whenever we encounter hardships. And it is said that the manner in which people can really seek the help of God, or become individuals who can really counter the problems that they are facing, is that they should hold steadfast to patience or steadfastness and to the prayer. So this is what's going to make them really strong and resilient. And then the verse says, Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin, that God is with those who are steadfast. So this tells us that the Almighty wants to test whether we show steadfastness and perseverance in the wake of problems and difficulties that we encounter. And if we do, then if we show this steadfastness, if we persevere and don't lose hope, continue with our struggle, the Almighty says that He is going to be on our side. In Allah ma'as sabirin, He is going to be on the side of the people who are steadfast. So the two things that the Almighty has told us that we should adhere to whenever we feel that problems are encompassing us from all sides is steadfastness and the prayer as well. The prayer, as we know, is a means of warding out or is a means of countering these hardships. When we stand in prayer, when we talk to the Almighty in prayer, when we present our difficulty in prayer, it is like a petition that we are presenting before the Lord of the heavens and the earth, the Creator of the heavens and the earth. This petition is now being lodged in that Supreme Court of the Almighty. And we actually consign the matter to the Almighty, and we say that now we are consigning, we could not have been capable enough to come to grips with this situation. Now we are consigning our problem to you. So when we stand up in prayer, when we talk to God in prayer, we have that reassurance or a feeling of reassurance from Him that He is with us, and we have actually taken the support of someone who is always there for us. So we have to also realize that at times when we show steadfastness, at times when we are very vigilant in our prayer, it's not that the problems that we are facing that they're going to go away. It's not a guarantee that this verse is giving. All that this verse is telling us, that it gives us the courage to fight back. Our problems may not go, because the problems, they come and go under another law of the Almighty, and that is the law of test and trial. But if we want to counter these problems and at the same time not feel the brunt of these problems, instead of feeling the brunt of these problems, we are at mental peace, and in spite of the things that we are facing, we still feel comfortable in life, we still smile, we still observe our routines, then it is because of the fact that we have consigned our matter to the Almighty, and that because of the fact that we are showing this steadfastness. So showing this steadfastness, and at the same time being someone who is attached to the Almighty, is what is required. Because as I said, problems may not go away, but our own attitude towards these problems and the fact that we would be able to circumvent these problems is going to be something which is going to be there, is something that we have to experience. So anyone who has experienced this can always vouch for the fact that the fact is that in spite of the problem that we face, because you see, problems are something which always don't go away. A problem is replaced by another problem, and at times they come in clusters. So life is a continuous procession in which these problems come and go. But if we adhere to the prayer and if we are steadfast, then we are told that this is something which God will really, really be granting us, that we would be able to still live our life and be in a comfortable position mentally if we seek solace with the Almighty. So now we go on to the second part of our study circle, which is the Hadith of the day. And this Hadith has been taken from the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. This verse actually, or this Hadith is actually again something which tells us of the tremendous bounties of the Almighty and how He waits for certain opportunities, or He finds these opportunities, so that if we cash on these opportunities, then He is there to reward us. He is there to be in front of us and to grant us everything that we would like to have. So in this regard, we have to realize that as far as life is concerned, as far as our own routine is concerned, there are these bonus points or these bonus areas which God has placed so that He could forgive us our minor sins. And the one that we are going to study here today is exactly one of them. So the words are, it has been reported by Usman ibn Affan. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من توضأ فأحسن الوضوء خرجت خطاياه من جسده حتى تخرج من تحت أظفاره. So Usman ibn Affan stated that God's messenger said, a person who does wudu in a thorough manner, his sins will leave his body to the extent that they will even depart from under his fingernails. So this again is something it's like a huge bonus which the Almighty has given us, that if we are individuals, that if we do a wudu in a very thorough way, of course we know by wudu it is meant that we are to prepare ourselves for the prayer. Remember, the prayer has certain prerequisites, and one of the prerequisites of the prayer is that we must be ceremonially clean, and this ceremonial cleanliness actually relates to the fact that we have to follow a certain procedure of cleaning our bodies, and we all know what wudu is. So as far as the physical cleanliness part is concerned, that is we all of us know that it cleanses certain parts. At the same time, this spiritual aspect is something which the Prophet Muhammad has actually stated before Usman, and he has reported this, that if we do a wudu in a thorough manner, which signifies the fact that if we are not doing something merely for the sake of a routine, when we do something in a thorough manner, the Almighty likes the fact that we are thorough in our mannerisms, especially those mannerisms which relate to our rituals. So to be a person who is thorough in his rituals and in her rituals is something which really pleases the Almighty. And you know what? This gives us this edge that we should be people who should be thorough in all other affairs as well. So being thorough in doing wudu or the ceremonial ablution is something which actually signals for us that we have to be thorough as far as possible in other rituals as well. For example, when we pray, when we fast, when we are charitable, then let it be something which is really done from the depth of our hearts in a very, very elaborate and a thorough way. And not only this, here again is a guidance that is useful in all spheres of life. And of course, when we are working, when we are doing our jobs, when we are being answerable to our superiors, then the task that we have been assigned, we have to be thorough in that. So just as we have to please the Almighty, or we please the Almighty when we do something in a thorough way, and the reward of that thoroughness is that the Almighty says that the sins that relate to the body, they will be forgiven as far as of course, the things are concerned which even which will depart from us, even to the extent from under the fingernails, which tells us that the Almighty is just providing this opportunity to us. And again, a word of caution here is necessary, that of course these sins relate to those minor sins that we do. They do not relate to sins in which we infringe upon the rights of others, or we usurp the rights of others. So that would not be something that would be the right conclusion that we have drawn. But in any case, thoroughness is something which the Almighty has actually singled out, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ here has also has stressed in a very elaborate way that we have to be thorough. And as I said, that this thoroughness must reflect in our lives as well, in our own lives. Whatever task that we have laid down before us, or we have set upon ourselves, it should be done in a very, very thorough way, in full depth, leaving no stone unturned, giving it the full our full energy, our full reservoirs of energy, so that we are able to justify the work that we do in a very, very honorable way. We now come to the third part of our study circle, and this is the Bible verse. In fact, these are three verses 19 to 21, and they have been taken from the book of Deuteronomy, which is the revised canon, and the chapter is chapter number 24. So I have entitled it as Caring for the Needy. So these verses go as: when you get in the grain from your field, if some of the grain has been dropped by chance in the field, do not go back and get it, but let it be for the man from a strange land, the child without a father, and the widow, so that the blessing of the Lord your God be on all the work of your hands. When you are shaking the fruit from your olive trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Do not grow over the branches a second time. Let some be for the man from a strange land, the child without a father, and the widow. When you are pulling the grapes from your vines, do not take upon those who have been dropped. Do not take up those which have been dropped. Let them be for the man from a strange land, the child without a father, and the widow. So this is something which all books of all divine books do tell us, that we have to be charitable in on our undertakings, and we must realize that the ancient societies, one of the biggest means of income would be orchards and gardens, in which fruits and fruit trees would be planted, and people would pick the fruit when it would ripen. So here it is said that when we go to pick the fruit of our trees, similarly when we go and pick the grain of what we had cultivated, so if something is dropped on the floor, or something is not properly taken towards our own reservoirs, something which remains in the trees, or remains in the crop, in the field, then let it stay. Don't go back and get it again. Leave it for the stranger. Of course, here it is meant people who are alien to the land. And again it is said, and leave it for the person or the child who is without a father, and for the widow. So of course the bottom line here is that the weakest section of the society, which of course include orphans and widows and people who are traveling and from a strange land, then if they come across and they are able to gather the fruit and the grain, then this is something which is the right, or which is their right actually, and we must always think that as a right they should be given this opportunity to take away this fruit. And so it's a noble act in which the prophet of God in a divine book has told us, and the Almighty of course is the source behind it, that be charitable, and even these small charities do count. Leaving a small amount of fruit in your orchards, I mean, this is not going to hurt no one. And so let it be for the people who are passers-by, who are the weakest sections of the society, so that they can benefit from that. And which is a signal to us that let us be on the lookout to help people You see, prophets of God and the books of the Almighty, they are always urging us through small examples to go towards bigger realities. So when it is said that you leave some fruit for the people around you who are not that, who are underprivileged, who are deprived, again, this is a signal to us. It's like an insinuation to us. It tells us that in other affairs of life as well, if you have something that you can spare for others, if you have something which of course you are using, but you can spare a lot more, or at least a fair bit of for others, then be on the lookout. Be attentive to this. Be attentive to the needs of others. So being attentive to the needs of other people, being caring and sharing what we have is something which prophets of God always teach us. And this is something which is an object lesson for each and every one of us, that we have to think of people around us. We must not always think of our own selves. We must not always be people who are always concentrating and trying to do everything for our own selves. This should not be the case. It has to be something in which we must always be thinking about other people. We must be having this urge that however small it may be, if it comes to us, then we will not shy away. We often discuss this, that whatever small thing you can do for others is always welcome. It's always something which is going to please the Almighty. We should not run away from it thinking that it's just a very small thing. Even small bits count. Remember, people for whom every person is doing a small bit, then imagine the person who's receiving small bits from everyone. He's going to receive a whole lot of things if everything is put together. So we have to understand these aspects and these subtle aspects of life. So with this we come to the fourth section of our study circle, and this is again something which is a very important topic, and that is criticizing others. Are there any rules? So criticism is something which comes very, very naturally to all of us, and in fact we are really elated. We are so happy that if we get an opportunity to criticize others, because it somehow makes us it makes us feel superior to others. So a word of caution here needs to be made, and that is that criticism, of course, is something, first of all, that it must hinge on constructive criticism. Criticism merely for the sake of criticism is not something which is worthwhile. In fact, it is more of a superiority complex that we get inflicted with, and we would really like ourselves to be placed on a higher pedestal, and we criticize others. So one thing that we have to realize is that whenever we are criticizing someone, it should not be merely for the sake of criticism, merely to score some points, merely to undermine that person, merely to humiliate that person. No, that should certainly never be the case. It should always be something constructive that we would like our person whom we are criticizing to understand. And secondly, I would say the best criticism, if you really go deeper into the science of criticism, is self-criticism. Before embarking on criticizing others, let's criticize ourselves. And we can do that in a very harsh way as well, because we know our own facts. We know who are from our inside. So a lot of data is not available to us regarding other people, and hence we have to be lenient in our criticism of others because of the fact that the full data is not available to us. But regarding our own selves, we know what exactly is the issue. And the third thing that we need to understand here is that criticism should always begin with words of praise of that person. You see, every person, he may be having or she may be having some faults and mistakes, but at the same time, there must be some good points in his or her personality as well. So we have to acknowledge them, and not merely acknowledge them in our heart, but by our words. We must express ourselves to that person. In a way, this will make that person feel that we are his well-wisher or her well-wisher, and it's not that we are his rivals, or we would like to make him down in the eyes of other people. That is not the case. So we should start every criticism with a genuine praise of the person that we intend to criticize, of some good point that he or she might be having. And then criticism must not be repetitive. At times we are just waiting and waiting and repeating the same criticism over and over again in a very short span of time. This is especially true for our children who we come across, or people who are very close to us, and we keep doing that. That should not be the case. And then another point or another rule here would be that criticism must be communicated to the person directly. Often we do not do this, and we start criticizing a person in front of some other person, and invariably he or she gets to know what we are doing, and that of course is something which really disturbs that person, and it becomes counterproductive in criticizing that person. So let us be more direct in criticizing the person. And another thing is that we must not base our criticism on hearsay. It's not that should not be based on unfounded facts, because this would be a very bad thing. It would only mean that we are criticizing for the sake of criticism. It's not that we have well researched into the facts. It's just that we would like to splash these things in front of that person. And then another thing is that when we are criticizing someone, we have to use polite words. Using harsh words is not going to help at all. We must criticize a person in a very polite ways. Our stance can be very strong without our words being strong. Words should be polite, because you see, if your criticism is couched in harsh language, in bad language, the other person is going to be put off at the very outset. He or she is not going to listen to you. So criticism has to be done in a gentle way. It should not be repetitive. The best criticism is self-criticism. It should not be based on hearsay. It is something which should always begin by the acknowledgement and good points of a person, so that he or she thinks that we are his or her well-wishers, and we don't mean to do anything which is of the sort of humiliation. So these are some of the rules that we need to follow, because you see, criticism is something that goes on in our lives, and every now and then this is something that we keep on doing. So it's not that we should stop doing it. It is only that we should be very, very, very observant of certain rules which we have just discussed here, because they're going to really help us in this enterprise. So with these words, we come to an end of our study circle, and now you have the chance to, if in case you have any questions, please. It's the time to present those questions.
Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Walaikum salam.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
First question is regarding the verse. Here, it says that believers should get help from steadfastness and prayer.
Mm-hmm.
So in this verse, the context, what is the exact context of steadfastness? Steadfastness, what I think, is being firm on something in time of difficulty or something like that.
Right.
So how we get help from steadfastness?
So you see, when we are patient, it's like telling us that to persevere in the face of adversity, to be steadfast when we are facing difficulty, and not starting to complain, not starting to brood, not starting to get frustrated, not starting to run away. So these are the opposites from which you can understand what steadfastness is. That steadfastness is basically being brave in the wake of difficulties. So this is how you help. You seek help from steadfastness. It's like saying that patience is the name of the game, or perseverance is the name of the game, because this is going to help you. If you're going to become jittery, if you're going to become impatient, if you're going to show frustration, then that's not the right way in countering problems. So this is how you should understand that.
Sure, fine. The other thing, while explaining, that you mentioned regarding that there's a grand plan of Allah, that all things happens according to that grand plan.
Right.
So wanted to understand that the time of the death of a person, all predestined, everything is already planned when a person will pass away in this world.
Yes, that is how we understand that the Almighty knows not only the passing away of a person, but also what's going to happen in future for all people. The only thing is that he does not drive that thing to happen. It's not that he is instrumental in that happening. He's forcing things to happen his way. The thing is that he knows that this is going to happen.
Okay.
So
Sure.
you have to make this difference, make this distinction, that one thing is to make things happen, and the other thing is to leave the choice to a person, and whatever choice he will adopt is in the knowledge of the Almighty. It's not that he is making that person adopt a certain choice, but it's like giving the person the option, and whatever choice or whichever choice he or she adopts ultimately is known to God. It's like being told that he already knows what's going to happen, but he's not making or forcefully making that person do that thing. It's just like saying that the result is known to him.
Sure. Fine. The other question was related to the hadith of doing the wuzu thoroughly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I should be going into such details or not, but I always wanted to discuss this question with somebody. You must have noticed that when we are traveling, when we are outside, so a lot of times, so for nature's call, we have to go to public urinals, public washrooms, and so apparently, how may I say? So you may not be able to ensure yourself that
So you see, this narrative concerns normal circumstances when you're not in a hurry, when you're not pushed for time. Of course, these are exceptions when you are traveling or when you are in a certain place that you have to hurry up the things that you need to do. So that's always understandable. But this narrative specifically relates to situations in which we have all the time in the world. For example, we are relaxing in our houses and we are about to pray, and in spite of having all the time, instead of being thorough in our wuzu, we are slothy, we are irresponsible, or we just are not doing it properly. So every narrative has to be understood by understanding the fact that this is something which relates to situations, and when situations change, directives also change.
Sure, fine. That's it. I just wanted to add a comment on your recent interview with Shabir Ali. That was a very good talk and very precise and to the point. So I really liked it.
Thank you very much.
That message prevailed because it had very specific problematic areas or questions which defines the perception of Islam, and so all those points were to the point. So really like that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay. So viewers, we now come to an end to our study circle. Thank you very much for your presence. Inshallah, we'll be back the same time next week on Saturday. Until then, it is Khuda Hafiz.